r/relationship_advice. Grandfather burned all bridges after I exposed his fake identity. r/relationship_advice. Grandfather burned all bridges after I exposed his fake identity. The federal investigator's business card is still sitting on my kitchen counter, and I can't stop staring at it. 3 days ago, my biggest worry was my organic chemistry midterm. Now I'm apparently a key witness in a benefits fraud case that could send my grandfather to federal prison. I need to tell someone what happened, because I'm losing my mind over here and my family sure as hell isn't speaking to me anymore. So here's the thing, my grandfather has been the town hero for as long as I can remember. Purple Heart recipient, Bronze Star, the works. Every Memorial Day, he'd be front and center at the VFW ceremony, telling stories about his service in Vietnam to anyone who'd listen. The local newspaper did a feature on him last year. He's been collecting disability benefits for PTSD and a war injury to his back for over 2 decades. I worship this man. When my parents got divorced when I was 8, Grandpa Joe stepped in. He taught me to fish, helped with my homework, came to every single one of my soccer games. He was the most important person in my life, and I genuinely believed he was a genuine American hero. Last month, I was working on a family history project for my genealogy class. I needed military service records, birth certificates, that kind of stuff. Grandpa Joe seemed weirdly reluctant to help, kept saying his records were lost in a fire or classified. But I'm stubborn, and I figured I'd surprise him by tracking everything down myself. That's when I found the Canadian immigration records. Joseph Michael Chen, my grandfather's real name, not the Joseph Mitchell Cooper I've known my whole life, entered Canada as a draft dodger in 1968. He lived in Toronto under a false identity for 6 years. He didn't just avoid the war, he actively protested it while actual soldiers were dying overseas. The man who raised me to respect the flag and honor our veterans was burning draft cards in a foreign country. When I confronted him with the documents, I expected shame, maybe an explanation. Instead, he got angry. Told me I didn't understand what it was like back then, that he did what he had to do to survive. Then, and this is where I really lost it, he had the audacity to ask me for money. Said his disability check was late and he needed help with rent. He was asking his granddaughter for money while committing federal fraud. I gave him one chance. I told him he needed to come clean to the family and stop taking benefits he wasn't entitled to. I said I'd help him figure out how to make things right without destroying his life. He laughed in my face. Actually laughed. Said nobody would believe some college kid with an internet connection over a decorated veteran. Said I was being dramatic and that I should mind my own business. So I didn't mind my own business. Last Tuesday, I walked into the VFW with a folder full of documents. I presented everything to the post commander, real military records showing no service, Canadian immigration papers, even photos I'd found of him at anti-war protests in Toronto. Then I went to the town council, since they'd given him a special veteran parking spot and a key to the city. Then I called my aunts and uncles. The shitstorm that followed has been absolutely nuclear. The VFW stripped him of his membership immediately. The town council is meeting tomorrow to discuss legal action. Half my family is calling me a vindictive bitch who destroyed an old man's life, and the other half is so shocked they don't know what to think. But here's what's really eating at me, I think I might have made the biggest mistake of my life. The worst part isn't even the federal investigation or my family treating me like I murdered someone. It's watching what this is doing to my grandmother. Grandma Ruth has been married to him for 43 years. 43 years of believing she was married to a war hero, proudly displaying his medals in their living room, bragging to her church friends about her brave husband. She's 81 years old, has mild dementia that comes and goes, and now she's completely shattered. My cousin Maya called me yesterday, one of the few family members still speaking to me, and said Grandma Ruth keeps asking why everyone is lying about Grandpa Joe. She doesn't understand why his veteran friends won't visit anymore or why the VFW won't let him come to the Friday night dinners he's attended for decades. Maya said she found Grandma Ruth polishing his fake medals at 3 a.m., crying and asking what she did wrong. I keep telling myself that the truth matters, that what he did was wrong, that he stole money and honor that belonged to real veterans. But watching my grandmother's world crumble is killing me. And then there's the money situation, which is somehow getting worse by the day. Turns out Grandpa Joe's fraud goes way deeper than just disability benefits. He's been getting a veteran's pension, reduced property taxes, free medical care at the VA. The federal investigator, Agent Morrison, estimates he's fraudulently received over $300,000 in benefits and services over the past 20 years. The government wants it back. All of it. With interest and penalties. My grandparents' house, the same house where I spent every summer, where Grandpa Joe taught me to play chess on the back porch, is going to be seized. They've frozen his bank accounts. Grandma Ruth doesn't understand why they can't afford groceries anymore. My Aunt Linda, who's always been Grandpa Joe's favorite, is leading the family campaign against me. She's telling everyone that I'm a selfish brat who destroyed our family for a college project. She claims I could have just kept my mouth shut and none of this would have happened. Yesterday she texted me a photo of Grandma Ruth crying and said, "Hope your A+ was worth this." But my Uncle Frank, Grandma Ruth's brother and an actual Vietnam veteran, called me this morning and said something that's been playing on repeat in my head. He said, "Honey, your grandfather stole my war. He stole my friends' wars. He stole honor from men who bled for this country while he was safe in Canada. You did the right thing, even if it hurts like hell." The thing is, I'm starting to doubt whether I really did this for noble reasons or if I was just hurt and angry that my hero turned out to be a fraud. When Grandpa Joe laughed at me and dismissed me as just some college kid, something inside me snapped. Was exposing him really about justice, or was it about revenge? Agent Morrison wants me to testify at the federal hearing next month. He says my testimony about how Grandpa Joe reacted when confronted, especially him asking for money while knowing he was committing fraud, is crucial for proving intent. But testifying means there's no going back, no chance of our family ever healing from this. My mom hasn't spoken to me since this all came out. She's not taking sides publicly, but her silence is pretty clear. I think she's ashamed of me for destroying the man who helped raise me after her divorce fell apart. The worst part is that I still love him. Despite everything, despite the lies and the fraud and the way he manipulated our entire family for decades, I still love the man who taught me to ride a bike and drove me to school every day for 2 years. How do you reconcile loving someone with destroying them? The complications started piling up faster than I could handle them. Yesterday, I got a call from someone I didn't expect, Jerry Kowalski, the VFW post commander. His voice was gruff, tired. Kid, we need to talk. Can you come down here tonight? After hours. When I showed up, Jerry was sitting alone in the empty VFW hall, surrounded by faded photographs of real veterans. The silence felt suffocating. Your grandfather, he said without preamble, he wasn't just a member here. He was our treasurer for 8 years. My stomach dropped. What are you saying? I'm saying we've been going through the books since you brought us those documents. There's money missing. About 15 grand over the past 3 years. Jerry rubbed his face. Money that was supposed to go to veteran families in need, to our scholarship fund for military kids. I felt like I was going to throw up. It wasn't just federal benefits. Grandpa Joe had been stealing from the very veterans he'd been lying to for decades. We can't prove it was him yet, Jerry continued, but the timing matches up with when he started having more access to the accounts. And now, with everything else. He gestured helplessly. This is going to destroy us. When word gets out that we let a fraud manage our money for years, nobody's going to trust us again. We might have to close the post. I drove home in a daze, but it wasn't over. Waiting in my apartment parking lot was my cousin Derek, Uncle Frank's son, and someone I'd always been close to. But the look on his face wasn't friendly. Maya told me about the VFW money, he said. Jesus, Emily. What have you done? I didn't know about. That's not the point. He was shouting now, something Derek never did. You opened this can of worms, and now it's affecting everyone. You know what else your little truth crusade accomplished? They're investigating every veteran benefit claim in our county now. Real veterans, Emily. Guys who actually served, who actually earned their benefits, are getting their claims frozen pending verification because of the shitstorm you created. My hands were shaking. That's not my fault. Isn't it? My dad, your Uncle Frank, remember him? The guy who told you that you did the right thing. He can't get his medication refilled because the VA flagged his account. 40 years of legitimate service, and now he's treated like a potential fraudster because his wife's brother turned out to be a liar. Derek left me standing there, and I spent the next hour crying in my car. But the worst was yet to come. This morning, I got a text from Maya that made my blood run cold. Emergency. Grandpa Joe collapsed last night. He's in the hospital. Possible heart attack. I drove to the hospital, knowing I probably wasn't welcome but unable to stay away. I found my family clustered in the waiting room, their faces a mix of grief and rage when they saw me. This is your fault, Aunt Linda hissed. The stress of what you did to him, this is on you. Through the chaos, I overheard my mom talking to a doctor about Grandpa Joe's condition. The phrase, significant cardiac event, kept coming up. Then I heard something that made everything worse. We need to discuss his insurance coverage. There seems to be an issue with his veteran benefit status. Even in the hospital, even potentially dying, the consequences of his lies, and my decision to expose them, were following him. And by extension, following all of us. The federal hearing is in 3 weeks. Uncle Frank can't get his medication. The VFW might close. Grandpa Joe might die thinking his entire family hates him. And I'm the one who started it all. I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria, staring at terrible coffee and trying to process everything, when Agent Morrison appeared across from me. Somehow, a federal investigator finding me in a hospital felt perfectly fitting for how surreal my life had become. Miss Chen, he said, settling into the plastic chair. I heard about your grandfather's condition. I'm sorry. I wanted to tell him to leave, that this wasn't the time or place, but honestly, I was too emotionally drained to fight anymore. What do you want? We found more. His voice was gentle, but the words hit like a sledgehammer. A lot more. Morrison slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were documents I didn't recognize, bank statements, property records, loan applications. All with Grandpa Joe's forged military credentials. He used his fake veteran status to secure a business loan in 1987, Morrison explained quietly. Started that hardware store downtown with money he never should have qualified for. Then there's the life insurance policy, veterans get better rates. The mortgage refinancing in 2003. Even got a veteran's discount on his car insurance for 20 years. My head was spinning. How much are we talking about total? Conservative estimate. Close to $500,000 in fraudulent benefits, savings, and advantages over 3 decades. Morrison's expression was sympathetic but firm. This isn't just benefit fraud anymore, Miss Chin. This is systematic identity theft, wire fraud, bank fraud. The charges are going to be significant. I thought about Grandpa Joe lying in a hospital bed upstairs, machines monitoring his heart. What does this mean for my family? Everything tied to those fraudulent documents is potentially subject to seizure. The house, the store, savings accounts, even some family assets that were purchased with tainted money. Morrison paused. Your grandmother's retirement account might be affected if any of it was funded through the store's profits. The coffee in my stomach turned to acid. Grandma Ruth could lose everything, not just the house, but her entire life savings. There's something else, Morrison continued. We've been contacted by the Canadian authorities. They want to investigate how he obtained those false documents in the first place. If he was part of a larger identity fraud ring in the 1960s, this could get much bigger. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Maya, where are you? They're moving Grandpa Joe to cardiac ICU. It's bad. I stood up abruptly. I have to go. Miss Chen, Morrison called after me. I know this is difficult, but I need you to understand, your cooperation is the only thing that might help your family minimize the financial damage. If you testify, if you help us establish the timeline, we might be able to argue that some assets were legitimately earned. I stopped walking. And if I don't? Then we assume everything is tainted, and your grandmother loses it all. When I got back to the ICU waiting room, the scene had somehow gotten worse. Uncle Frank was there now, looking pale and shaky, clearly struggling without his medication. My mom was crying quietly in a corner chair. Aunt Linda was on the phone with what sounded like a lawyer. And then I saw him through the window of the cardiac unit, Grandpa Joe, looking so small and frail hooked up to all those machines. For a moment, he was just the man who used to make me pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, who never missed a single one of my soccer games. Maya appeared beside me. The doctors say the next 24 hours are critical. She paused. Emily, there's something else. A reporter called the house this morning. Someone leaked the story to the local paper. It's going to be front-page news tomorrow. I closed my eyes. Even if Grandpa Joe survived this heart attack, he'd wake up to find his entire life exposed for the whole town to see. The newspaper article was worse than I could have imagined. Maya showed it to me on her phone while we sat in the hospital waiting room the next morning. The headline read, Local War Hero Exposed AS Decades-Long Fraud, with a photo of Grandpa Joe at last year's Memorial Day ceremony, saluting the flag in his fake uniform. But it wasn't just the main story. There was a sidebar titled Veterans Benefits Under Scrutiny that made my stomach drop. It listed the names of 12 local veterans whose claims were now being re-evaluated because of the investigation Grandpa Joe's case had triggered. I recognized half the names, guys from the VFW, neighbors, friends' fathers. Channel 8 News wants an interview, Maya said quietly. They called me at 6 this morning asking for a comment from the family member who exposed the fraud. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare that kept getting worse. You didn't tell them it was me, right? Of course not. But Emily. She glanced around the waiting room, then leaned closer. People are talking. In a town this size, it won't stay secret long. As if summoned by her words, my phone started buzzing. Text after text from numbers I didn't recognize. Is it true your grandfather stole from veterans? My dad can't get his disability check because of your family. Hope you're proud of yourself. I turned the phone off, but the damage was done. Somehow, word was already getting out. Dr. Martinez appeared in the waiting room doorway, and we all stood up instinctively. Her expression was carefully neutral, the look doctors get when the news isn't good but isn't catastrophic either. Mr. Walsh is stable for now, she said. The cardiac event was significant, but he's responding to treatment. However, I need to discuss some complications. We gathered closer. Mom grabbed my hand despite everything that had happened between us lately. The stress has been considerable, Dr. Martinez continued. Beyond the physical symptoms, he's been experiencing what appears to be severe anxiety and some dissociative episodes. He's been asking for someone named David repeatedly and seems confused about what year it is. Aunt Linda frowned. David? We don't know any David. But I felt a chill run down my spine. I remembered Agent Morrison mentioning the name on the fake Canadian documents, David Walsh. Grandpa Joe was asking for his fake identity, the person he pretended to be for 2 years in Canada. There's something else, Dr. Martinez said. His insurance situation is complex. Given the ongoing federal investigation, we're having difficulty verifying his coverage. I need to know how the family wants to handle potential medical expenses. The question hung in the air like a bomb nobody wanted to defuse. Without his fraudulent veteran benefits, Grandpa Joe's insurance was basically worthless. And if the government seized all his assets, there'd be no way to pay for extended cardiac care. How much are we talking about? Uncle Frank asked, his voice hoarse. If he needs surgery, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. I watched my family exchange glances, the kind of looks people share when they're all thinking the same impossible thing. We were broke. Worse than broke. We were about to lose everything, and now we might be facing massive medical debt on top of it. That's when Aunt Linda turned to me with the coldest expression I'd ever seen. This is what your truth has cost us, Emily. Your grandfather might die because we can't afford to save him. And it's all because you couldn't leave well enough alone. The accusation hit me like a physical blow, but before I could respond, Maya's phone rang. She looked at the screen and went pale. It's someone from 60 Minutes, she whispered. They want to do a story about stolen valor in small-town America. The nightmare was about to go national. The 60 Minutes producer was persistent. Even after Maya declined the initial call, they somehow got my number, my mom's number, and even called the hospital asking to speak with the whistleblower granddaughter. I finally answered on the 4th try, thinking maybe if I talked to them once, they'd leave us alone. Miss Chen, this is Rebecca Martinez from 60 Minutes. We're doing a segment on stolen valor cases and how they impact families and communities. Your grandfather's case is particularly compelling because my grandfather is in cardiac ICU. I cut her off. This isn't the time. I understand this is difficult, but stories like this help prevent future fraud. You did the right thing exposing him. Did I? Sitting in a hospital waiting room, watching my family fall apart while medical bills piled up and federal agents circled like vultures, I wasn't sure I'd done the right thing about anything. We're prepared to offer compensation for an exclusive interview, she continued. Enough to help with those medical expenses I'm sure you're facing. I hung up, but her words stuck. Money. We desperately needed money, and here was someone offering it in exchange for throwing Grandpa Joe under the bus on national television. The irony wasn't lost on me, profiting from destroying him the same way he profited from his lies. Back in the ICU waiting room, things had gotten worse. Uncle Frank was having some kind of panic attack, hyperventilating into a paper bag while Aunt Linda rubbed his back. His medication schedule was completely disrupted, and the stress was making his symptoms worse. The bank called, Mom said when I sat down next to her. They're freezing the accounts pending the federal investigation. We can't even pay for groceries. Through the window, I could see Grandpa Joe was awake. A nurse was trying to calm him down, but even from here I could see he was agitated, probably asking for David again. The man who'd raised me was disappearing into confusion and fear, and I was the one who'd set it all in motion. My phone buzzed with another unknown number. This time it was someone claiming to be from a documentary crew. Then a podcast. Then a blogger who specialized in military fraud exposés. Word was spreading faster than I could contain it. Emily. Maya touched my shoulder. There's someone here to see you. I looked up to see Agent Morrison approaching with another federal agent I didn't recognize, a woman in a sharp suit who looked like she meant business. Miss Chen, this is Agent Patricia Wong from the Department of Justice, Morrison said. We need to discuss your testimony for the grand jury. My blood ran cold. Grand jury. Mr. Walsh's case is being escalated, Agent Wong explained in a crisp, no-nonsense voice. The scope of the fraud, combined with potential connections to organized identity theft operations from the 1960s, means this is going federal. You're going to be our key witness. But I just wanted him to tell the truth to our family, I said weakly. Well, now you're going to help us tell the truth to a federal court, she replied. The grand jury convenes next month. Your testimony will likely determine whether your grandfather faces 5 years or 25. I felt the walls closing in. Across the waiting room, my family was staring at me with a mixture of horror and betrayal. Uncle Frank looked like he might collapse again. Mom was crying silently. There's one more thing, Agent Wong continued. We've discovered evidence that suggests your grandfather may have assumed another person's identity, someone who actually died in Vietnam. If that's true, we're looking at desecration of military honors and federal identity theft of a deceased serviceman. The room started spinning. Not only had Grandpa Joe stolen valor, he might have literally stolen a dead soldier's name. The dead soldier's name was David Michael Walsh. He'd been 19 when he died in the Mekong Delta in 1967, shot by a sniper while trying to help a wounded medic. He had no living family, parents killed in a car accident when he was 17, no siblings, no girlfriend back home writing letters. He was perfect for someone who needed to disappear. Agent Wong showed me the death certificate on her tablet right there in the hospital waiting room, apparently unconcerned that my family could overhear every devastating detail. Your grandfather didn't just dodge the draft, she explained. He stole the identity of an actual war hero and spent 45 years collecting benefits meant for this boy's service and sacrifice. I stared at the black and white photo of David Walsh, the real David Walsh. He looked so young, barely older than me, with serious eyes and a crew cut. This kid had died for his country while my grandfather hid behind his name and collected money for his sacrifice. We found records showing Joseph Chin crossed into Canada in 1968 using forged documents claiming he was David Walsh recovering from more injuries, Agent Wong continued. When he returned to the U.S. in 1970, he continued using the identity. Your grandfather has been a ghost for over 50 years. Uncle Frank made a choking sound. Aunt Linda was staring at me like I'd personally murdered someone. But the worst part was Mom's expression, not anger anymore, just complete devastation as she realized her father wasn't just a fraud, but someone who'd built his entire American life on a dead soldier's grave. There's a memorial wall in Washington with David Michael Walsh's name on it, Agent Wong said quietly. Real veterans leave flowers there for him. Meanwhile, your grandfather has been cashing checks and playing poker at the VFW using his identity. My phone rang again, another reporter. I declined the call, but Agent Wong noticed. Media attention is good for our case, she said. Public pressure helps ensure justice. You should consider doing some interviews. Like the 60 Minutes producer who offered me money. The words came out more bitter than I intended. Money? Agent Wong's eyebrows shot up. How much money? I realized I probably just caused another problem. She said compensation for an exclusive interview. I hung up. Agent Wong exchanged a look with Agent Morrison. Miss Chen, accepting payment for testimony-related interviews could complicate your witness status. We need to discuss any media contact before you agree to anything. Great. Now I couldn't even potentially help pay for Grandpa Joe's medical bills without risking the federal case. I was trapped in a web of consequences that kept expanding no matter what choice I made. One more thing, Agent Wong said, apparently determined to destroy what was left of my family today. We're going to need to interview everyone who might have known about the identity theft. That includes immediate family members who may have been complicit or willfully ignorant. Mom went white. Complicit? I was 3 years old when he came back. But you've been his daughter for 40 years. You never questioned inconsistencies in his stories. Never wondered why he had no military friends from before 1970. Never thought it was odd that he had no documentation from his supposed service. I watched Mom's face crumble as she realized they were building a case that might implicate her too. The federal investigation wasn't just about Grandpa Joe anymore, it was about anyone who might have helped maintain his lies, even unknowingly. Through the ICU window, I could see nurses working around Grandpa Joe's bed. The machines were beeping faster, and someone was adjusting his medication. The man who taught me to ride a bike was fighting for his life while federal agents dismantled everything he'd ever built. And somewhere in Arlington National Cemetery, fresh flowers were probably being placed at David Michael Walsh's memorial, flowers meant for a hero, left by people who had no idea the man they were honoring had been buried twice. The next morning brought news that made everything infinitely worse. Maya shook me awake in the hospital waiting room where I'd spent the night curled up in an uncomfortable chair. Emily, you need to see this. She held out her phone, and my heart sank. The local news website had our story as the front page headline, Local War Hero Actually Dead Soldier Identity Thief. But that wasn't the worst part. Someone had leaked David Michael Walsh's real story, complete with his photograph and details about his actual service. It gets worse, Maya said grimly, scrolling down. Look at the comments. Hundreds of them, and they were brutal. Veterans from across the country were calling for Grandpa Joe's head. Someone had already created a Facebook group called Justice for David Walsh with over 3,000 members. People were sharing the story, adding their own outrage, calling for maximum prosecution. But the comment that made my blood freeze was from someone with the username VetDad1975, I've been leaving flowers at David Walsh's memorial for 15 years. My son served in the same unit as Walsh before he died in Iraq in 2010. If I ever see Joseph Chen, I'll show him what real military justice looks like. Maya, these people are making threats, I whispered. It's not just online, she said quietly. There were protesters outside your mom's house this morning. Someone spray-painted, traitor, on the garage door. I felt sick. Mom was still asleep in the chair next to me, exhausted from another night of watching her father fight for his life while his world burned down around him. Now she couldn't even go home safely. Dr. Peterson appeared in front of us, looking grim. Miss Chen. I need to speak with you about your grandfather's condition. I followed him away from my sleeping family, dreading what he was about to say. His pneumonia is worsening, Dr. Peterson explained. We're looking at potentially putting him on a ventilator today. But there's another issue. He's been asking for someone named David, not calling himself David, but asking for David to visit him. Do you know who this might be? My throat constricted. No, I lied. How could I explain that Grandpa Joe might be asking for the real David Walsh, the boy whose identity he'd stolen? Was his confused mind trying to make amends, or was he so deep in his lies that he'd convinced himself David was real? There's something else, Dr. Peterson continued. We've had to increase security. Someone called the hospital this morning claiming to be from a veterans organization, asking for his room number. Given the media attention, we're concerned about his safety. Even unconscious and dying, Grandpa Joe wasn't safe from the consequences of what I'd unleashed. I walked back toward the waiting room, but stopped when I heard voices around the corner. Uncle Frank was awake, talking to someone on his phone. I don't care what the lawyers say, he was whispering harshly. She destroyed our family. Emily needs to fix this somehow, or she's not welcome at Christmas, Easter, or any other family gathering ever again. Frank, she's your niece, Aunt Linda's voice protested weakly. She was my niece. Now she's the person who's going to put me in prison because I helped Dad fill out some VA paperwork 20 years ago. The feds think I'm part of a conspiracy, Linda. They're freezing our accounts too now. I pressed myself against the wall, realizing the investigation was spreading like a cancer through my family. Uncle Frank wasn't wrong, his signature was probably on dozens of documents that had helped maintain Grandpa Joe's false identity over the years. In the eyes of federal investigators, that made him complicit. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We know where you live, traitor lover. The truth was supposed to set everyone free. Instead, it was destroying us all. I deleted the threatening text and tried to focus on getting through the next few hours, but the hospital had become a fortress. Security guards flanked every entrance, and I noticed them doing extra rounds past the ICU. The media circus outside was growing too. Maya counted 6 news vans in a parking lot when she went to get coffee. Emily. A woman's voice made me turn around. She was maybe 50, wearing a crisp business suit with an American flag pin on her lapel. I'm Patricia Walsh. My blood turned to ice. Walsh. Are you David's sister? Well, his older sister. I was 18 when he was killed. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were red-rimmed. I flew in from Phoenix when I saw the news. I wanted to disappear into the floor. Of all the people I'd never wanted to face, David Walsh's family was at the top of the list. I'm so sorry, I whispered. I never meant for any of this to hurt you or your family. Hurt me? Patricia's laugh was bitter. Honey, you gave me back my brother. Do you know what it's like to grieve someone for 50 years, only to discover that some coward has been wearing his name like a costume? She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo, a family gathered around a memorial stone. This is David's memorial service last weekend. We held it after we found out the truth. 47 people came to honor my actual brother, not your grandfather's lies. Real people who remembered the boy he was before your grandfather erased him. The guilt was crushing. Mrs. I'm sorry, what's your married name? Walsh Martinez. But call me Patricia. She sat down next to me, and I braced for more anger. Instead, her voice softened. I'm not here to blame you, Emily. I'm here because David's story needs to be told correctly, and your grandfather's victims need to be heard too. Victims? The other families. Did you think your grandfather was the only one? Patricia's expression was grim. The federal investigation has uncovered at least 12 other cases of identity theft involving deceased soldiers from the same time period. It was apparently easier than people realized to steal a dead serviceman's identity in the chaos after Vietnam. My head was spinning. 12 other families like ours. 12 other families whose loved ones had their identities stolen. But also 12 other families like yours, people who thought they knew someone who turned out to be living a complete lie. Patricia reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. The FBI asked me to give you this. Inside were photographs of the real David Walsh, not just his military portrait, but family photos. David at his high school graduation. David teaching a little girl, probably Patricia, to ride a bike. David in his dress uniform, looking impossibly young and proud. The bike photo hit me like a punch to the stomach. My grandfather taught me to ride a bike, I said without thinking. So did mine. David learned from our dad, then taught me. It's what big brothers do. Patricia's voice cracked slightly. The FBI thinks your grandfather might have studied David's personal life extensively before assuming his identity. He may have deliberately copied mannerisms, interests, even family traditions. Every memory I had of Grandpa Joe was suddenly suspect. Had anything about him been real, or was he just performing David Walsh's life for us? How deep did the lies go? Patricia, I need to ask you something. I took a shaky breath. Do you want him to die? Because he might, and I don't know how to feel about that anymore. She was quiet for a long moment, studying the ICU doors. I want justice for David. But I'm not a monster, Emily. I don't want your family to suffer more than they already have. But as she spoke, I noticed something that made my stomach drop, a small recording device clipped to her jacket collar, its red light blinking steadily. Are you recording this conversation? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Patricia's hand moved instinctively to her collar. The FBI asked me to document any interactions with your family. It's standard procedure in federal fraud cases. I felt betrayed all over again, even though Patricia owed me nothing. So everything you just said about not wanting my family to suffer, that was performed for their benefit? No. Her voice was firm. Every word was true. But the truth is complicated, Emily. I can feel sympathy for your situation while still cooperating with the investigation into what happened to my brother's identity. Before I could respond, Maya appeared around the corner, moving fast. Emily, we have a problem. Your mom's awake and she's asking questions about the security guards. She doesn't know about the threats yet. I followed Maya back to the waiting room, where Mom was indeed awake and looking confused. Why are there so many police officers here? Did something happen to your grandfather? Mom, we need to talk. I sat down across from her, trying to figure out how to explain that the entire world now hated our family. The story about Grandpa Joe went viral. People are upset. Upset how? But even as she asked, Mom was pulling out her phone. I watched her face change as she scrolled through the news articles, the social media posts, the threats. Oh God. Emily, what have we done? What have we done? Uncle Frank's voice cut through the waiting room. He'd overheard everything. We didn't do anything, Sarah. Your daughter destroyed us single-handedly. Frank, please, Mom said weakly. Not here. No, we're doing this here. Right now. Frank turned to me, his face red with fury. Do you know what just happened? The VA called. They're not just investigating Dad, they're auditing every veteran benefit claim in our entire county going back 30 years. Innocent people are going to lose their benefits while they sort this mess out because of what you did. Maya stepped closer to me. Mr. Chen, Emily was trying to do the right thing. Was she? Because from where I'm sitting, she just made life harder for every legitimate veteran in 3 counties. Frank's voice was getting louder, attracting attention from hospital staff. My neighbor lost his leg in Afghanistan. Now he has to prove he's not a fraud because my niece decided to play detective. A security guard approached us. Sir, I need you to keep your voice down. This is a hospital. Of course it is. Frank laughed bitterly. Everything's about protecting someone else now. What about protecting the innocent people whose lives are being destroyed? Dr. Peterson appeared again, looking harried. Miss Chen, I need to speak with your family. All of you. We gathered around him, and I could tell from his expression that the news wasn't good. Your grandfather's condition has deteriorated significantly. We're going to need to intubate him within the hour. But there's something else, he's been increasingly agitated when he's conscious, calling out names. David, Joseph, sometimes Sarah. We've had to sedate him because he seems to be experiencing severe distress. What kind of distress? Mom asked. It's hard to say. Sometimes patients near the end of life experience psychological distress related to unresolved guilt or trauma. Given recent events. Dr. Peterson trailed off diplomatically. Uncle Frank snorted. Recent events. That's one way to put it. My phone rang, Detective Morrison. Emily, I need you to come to the station as soon as possible. We've uncovered something significant about your grandfather's case, and there are federal agents here who want to speak with you. I can't leave. My grandfather is dying. Emily, this can't wait. We've found evidence that your grandfather might not have been working alone in the identity theft. We need to discuss your family's potential involvement. The words hit me like ice water. They thought my mom was involved. Maybe Uncle Frank too. Maybe even me. I'll be there in an hour, I said, hanging up. Patricia Walsh-Martinez was still watching from across the room, her recording device blinking steadily, documenting every moment of my family's destruction. The drive to the police station felt like going to my own execution. Maya insisted on coming with me, despite my protests that she'd already done enough. You're not facing this alone, she said, gripping the steering wheel tighter as we passed another group of protesters outside the VFW hall. Someone had spray-painted "Liars" across the building's front window. Detective Morrison met us in the lobby, his expression unreadable. Emily, this is Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI Financial Crimes Division. The irony of her last name wasn't lost on me. And Agent Rodriguez from Immigration Enforcement. Agent Chen was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog every micro-expression on my face. Miss Chen, thank you for coming in. We need to discuss some discrepancies we found in your family's financial records. My stomach dropped. What kind of discrepancies? Agent Rodriguez opened a thick file. Your grandfather received approximately $340,000 in veteran benefits over the past 15 years. Disability payments, healthcare coverage, educational benefits that were transferred to family members. He looked up at me. Including a $15,000 educational grant that helped pay for your sophomore year tuition. The room started spinning. I didn't know. None of us knew where that money came from. That's what we need to establish, Agent Chen said. Because the financial trail suggests a more sophisticated operation. Your Uncle Frank's construction company received several government contracts specifically set aside for veteran-owned businesses. Your mother's medical bills from her cancer treatment 3 years ago were covered by veteran spouse benefits. Maya grabbed my hand under the table. They didn't know, she said firmly. Emily's the one who exposed this whole thing. Which brings us to an interesting question, Agent Rodriguez leaned forward. How exactly did you obtain those military records, Emily? Because accessing classified personnel files requires significant expertise and connections. I felt trapped. I told you before, I have a friend who works in records management. We've spoken to everyone with access to those systems. No one admits to helping you. Agent Chen's voice was calm but relentless. The level of documentation you provided suggests either professional assistance or inside knowledge. Are you saying Emily's lying? Maya's voice rose. We're saying the evidence suggests this investigation was initiated by someone with resources and knowledge that a college student typically wouldn't possess. Detective Morrison cleared his throat. Emily, is there anything else you haven't told us about how you got that information? I thought about my anonymous contact, the person who'd first sent me the documents that started this whole nightmare. I'd assumed it was someone who knew our family, maybe someone with suspicions about Grandpa Joe. But what if it was more calculated than that? There was someone else, I admitted reluctantly. Someone contacted me first, sent me some preliminary documents. They're the one who pointed me toward the military records. The agents exchanged glances. Who? Agent Chen demanded. I don't know. They used an encrypted email account, never gave me a name. We're going to need access to those communications, Agent Rodriguez said. Because what you're describing sounds like a coordinated effort to expose your grandfather. Someone wanted this information to come to light, and they used you to do it. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom, come back now. The doctor says it's time. I have to go, I said, standing shakily. My grandfather is dying. Agent Chin handed me a business card. This conversation isn't over. We'll need you back here tomorrow with your laptop and any other devices you use to communicate with this anonymous source. As Maya and I hurried back to the hospital, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been played by everyone, my grandfather, my family, and now apparently some unknown puppet master who'd orchestrated this entire revelation. The hospital hallway felt different when we returned, quieter, more somber. The circus of reporters had thinned out, but Patricia Walsh-Martinez was still there, now talking quietly with a man I didn't recognize. They both looked up when Maya and I walked past, and I caught fragments of their conversation, federal investigation expanding. And, family complicity. Mom was standing outside Grandpa Joe's room with Dr. Peterson, both looking grim. Uncle Frank was nowhere to be seen. Where's Frank? I asked. He left, Mom said flatly. Said he couldn't watch this anymore. Said watching Dad die was nothing compared to watching our family's reputation die. She looked at me with exhausted eyes. How did it go with the police? They think we're all criminals now, I said, too drained for diplomacy. Apparently we've been benefiting from fraud for years without knowing it. That grant that helped with my tuition. Stolen veteran money. Mom's face went white. The educational benefit. But your grandfather said he'd earned that through his service. He earned it through 15 years of lies. The words came out harsher than I intended. They want to know how I really got those documents, and they think someone's been manipulating me from the beginning. Dr. Peterson cleared his throat gently. Mrs. Chen, your father is asking for Emily specifically. He's lucid right now, but we don't know for how long. I didn't want to see him. After everything the FBI had just told me, after learning that my entire college education was partially funded by fraud, the last thing I wanted was to face the man who'd orchestrated it all. But Mom's pleading look made the decision for me. The room was dim, filled with the steady beeping of monitors and the wheeze of the ventilator they'd finally put him on. Grandpa Joe looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, his skin gray and papery. But his eyes were alert when they found mine. He tried to speak around the breathing tube, managing only a weak gesture toward the notepad on his bedside table. With shaking hands, he wrote in barely legible script, I'm sorry. Sorry for what? I whispered, moving closer despite myself. For lying. For the fraud. For destroying our family. He wrote again, more urgently, not supposed to be like this. What wasn't supposed to be like this? His hand was trembling now, but he managed to write, someone new. Someone watching. Not just you digging. My blood went cold. What do you mean someone new? Letters, he wrote. Threats. Said they'd expose everything if I didn't pay. The room started spinning around me. Grandpa Joe, are you saying someone was blackmailing you? He nodded weakly, then wrote, months before you found records. Someone else already knew. Maya grabbed my arm. Emily, if someone was blackmailing him and then contacted you with those documents. They used me, I breathed. Someone wanted him exposed, and they made sure I'd be the one to do it. Grandpa Joe was writing again, his letters getting shakier, tried to protect family. Kept paying. Then you found out anyway. How much? I asked. How much were you paying them? Everything, he wrote. All the benefit money. They took it all. The monitors started beeping more rapidly as his agitation increased. A nurse rushed in, checking his vitals with concern. He needs to rest, she said firmly. His heart can't handle this stress. But Grandpa Joe grabbed my wrist with surprising strength, pulling me closer. He whispered something around the breathing tube, so quiet I had to lean in to hear. Find David Morrison. He knows the truth. David Morrison. Detective Morrison's first name was Mike, but he'd mentioned David earlier, one of the names Grandpa Joe had been calling out in his delirium. As the nurse ushered us out, I realized that everything I thought I knew about this situation was wrong. Someone had been pulling the strings from the beginning, and I'd been their unwitting weapon. The question was, who was David Morrison, and what truth was he hiding? I pulled Maya aside in the hospital corridor, my mind racing. We need to find out who David Morrison is before I go back to the FBI tomorrow. Emily, maybe we should just tell them what your grandfather said about the blackmail, Maya suggested, but I was already pulling out my phone. If there's some connection between Detective Morrison and this David person, I need to understand it first. What if the police are involved in whatever's been happening? I started with a basic search, but there were dozens of David Morrisons in our state alone. Then I remembered something. When Detective Morrison had introduced himself at the police station, he'd mentioned being relatively new to our town, transferred from Portland about 2 years ago. Maya, what if Detective Morrison isn't just coincidentally named Morrison? What if? My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Unknown number. Hello. Emily Chin. The voice was digitally altered, clearly using some kind of voice modulation software. I see you're getting closer to the truth. My blood turned to ice. Who is this? Someone who's been watching your family for a very long time. Your grandfather mentioned our correspondence, I assume. Maya's eyes went wide as she heard the mechanical voice through the phone. I put it on speaker and motioned for her to start recording on her own device. You're the one who's been blackmailing him, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Blackmail is such an ugly word. I prefer to think of it as collecting a debt. Your grandfather stole hundreds of thousands of dollars from veterans who actually bled for this country. I simply ensured that money went to better causes. By threatening him. By using me to destroy my family. A distorted laugh echoed through the phone. Your family destroyed itself the moment they chose to live off blood money. I just expedited the process. What do you want? I demanded. Justice. Your grandfather's exposure was just the beginning. There are others like him, and I intend to expose them all. You should feel proud, you helped reveal the truth about a fraud and a coward. And Detective Morrison? How does he fit into this? There was a pause. Detective Morrison is exactly what he appears to be, a police officer doing his job. Though I suspect his thoroughness in investigating your case stems from personal experience with the damage stolen valor can cause. Before I could ask what that meant, the line went dead. Maya stopped recording, her hands shaking. Emily, this person is completely unhinged. They've been manipulating your entire family for months. I stared at my phone, trying to process what had just happened. They said Detective Morrison has personal experience with stolen valor. What if his brother or father was a real veteran who got screwed over by someone like Grandpa Joe? Or what if David Morrison is his son or brother, and that's why your grandfather keeps calling that name? Maya suggested. Maybe David Morrison was a real veteran who died, and Detective Morrison has been tracking down fraud cases to honor his memory. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your email. You'll find everything you need to understand David Morrison's story. Use it wisely. A friend of justice. My email contained a single attachment, a newspaper obituary from Portland dated 3 years ago. The headline read, Local Marine dies from complications related to PTSD, family seeks better mental health resources for veterans. The accompanying photo showed a young man in dress blues, and a name beneath it made my stomach drop, Staff Sergeant David Morrison, survived by his father, Detective Michael Morrison, Portland Police Department. Oh my God, Maya whispered, reading over my shoulder. Detective Morrison's son died while your grandfather was collecting benefits meant for people just like him. Suddenly, Detective Morrison's intensity during our interviews made perfect sense. This wasn't just a fraud case for him, it was personal. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Detective Morrison hadn't been assigned to this case randomly, he'd likely requested it. His son David had died struggling with PTSD while frauds like my grandfather collected benefits that could have funded better veteran mental health programs. We have to tell him we know, I said, but Maya grabbed my arm. Emily, think about this. A grieving father with a badge who's been investigating the man who stole from veterans while his son suffered. What if he's not just investigating anymore? What if he's the one who's been blackmailing your grandfather? My phone buzzed again. Another message, Detective Morrison doesn't know about our correspondence. He believes he's conducting a legitimate investigation. Don't burden him with unnecessary complications. Someone's watching us, I whispered, looking around the hospital corridor frantically. They know we just figured out the connection. Maya pulled me toward the elevator. We're leaving. Now. As the elevator descended, my mind raced through the implications. If Detective Morrison wasn't a blackmailer, then someone else had been using his son's death as motivation for their own twisted sense of justice. Someone with access to military records, immigration documents, and enough technical knowledge to alter their voice and cover their tracks. The person on the phone said there are others like Grandpa Joe, I realized. What if this isn't about my family at all? What if we're just one case in some larger vigilante operation? The elevator opened to reveal Detective Morrison himself standing in the lobby, looking haggard and exhausted. When he saw us, his expression tightened. Ms. Chen, I was hoping to catch you. We need to talk about your grandfather's claims of blackmail. His voice was carefully controlled, but I could see the strain around his eyes. Detective Morrison, I began carefully, before we do that, I need to ask you something. Did you request to be assigned to this case? He studied my face for a long moment. What makes you ask that? Because I know about David. The words hit him like a physical blow. His professional composure cracked, and for a moment I saw the grieving father beneath the badge. Who told you about my son? Someone who's been manipulating this entire situation, I said. Detective, I don't think you're just investigating fraud. I think someone's been feeding you information, guiding your investigation, making sure you dig deeper than you normally would. His hand moved instinctively to his service weapon, not threateningly, but like a man realizing he might not be in control of the situation. Explain. Now. Maya stepped closer to me. Someone's been blackmailing Emily's grandfather for months, taking all the fraudulent benefit money. They used Emily to expose him publicly, and now they're watching us. They know we figured out the connection to your son. That's impossible, Detective Morrison said, but his voice lacked conviction. I've been building this case for military records and, he stopped, his face going pale. The anonymous tip that started this investigation. Someone called in with specific information about Joseph Chen's service discrepancies. When? I demanded. 3 months ago. Right around the time your grandfather says the blackmail started. He ran a hand through his graying hair. Jesus Christ. Someone's been playing all of us. My phone rang again. Same unknown number. Answer it, Detective Morrison said grimly. Put it on speaker. Have you all had a nice chat? The mechanical voice asked when I picked up. Detective Morrison, I'm sorry for your loss. Your son deserved better than what this country gave him. Who are you? Morrison demanded, his voice deadly quiet. I'm someone who ensures justice is served when the system fails. Emily's grandfather was just the beginning. There are dozens more like him, and now that I have a detective, a whistleblower, and public attention, my work can really begin. Detective Morrison, the voice continued, check your email. You'll find evidence on 12 more stolen valor cases across Oregon and Washington. Each one represents hundreds of thousands in fraudulent benefits, money that could have saved veterans like your son. Morrison was already pulling out his phone, his jaw clenched tight. This is still illegal. You can't take justice into your own hands. Can't I? The system failed David Morrison. It failed countless others while men like Joseph Chen lived comfortable lives. I'm simply correcting the balance. By destroying families. I shot back. By manipulating people. By making me the weapon that tore apart everyone I love. You chose truth over comfort, Emily. That's admirable. I chose it because I thought I was doing the right thing, not because I was someone's puppet. Detective Morrison held up a hand, studying his phone screen. His face had gone ashen. These files, this level of detail. Whoever you are, you have access to classified military databases. A pause. Detective, your investigation was exemplary. The Portland DA will be very interested in these additional cases. Consider it a gift, justice for the veterans who actually earned it. Who are you? Morrison demanded again. Someone who understands that sometimes the system needs help. Emily, your grandfather is awake. I suggest you say your goodbyes. The federal charges will be filed tomorrow. The line went dead. We stood in stunned silence until Morrison's phone rang. Detective Morrison, yes, sir, what do you mean anonymous evidence delivery? 12 cases. Jesus. He hung up and looked at us grimly. Someone just delivered boxes of evidence to the Portland DA's office. Military records, financial documents, recorded confessions. A dozen stolen valor cases spanning 2 states. What happens now? I asked. Now I have to decide whether to pursue an investigation into vigilante justice, or let sleeping dogs lie while the DA prosecutes a dozen cases of veteran fraud. He studied my face. What are you going to do about your grandfather? I looked toward the elevators leading back to Grandpa Joe's room. 24 hours ago, I thought I was facing a simple choice between family loyalty and moral obligation. Now I realized I'd been a pawn in someone else's war for justice, but that didn't change the fundamental truth of what my grandfather had done. I'm going to see him, I said finally. Not to forgive him, and not to destroy him further. Just to end this chapter. Maya squeezed my hand. I'll wait here. Detective Morrison nodded slowly. For what it's worth, Ms. Chen, you did the right thing. Even if the methods were manipulated, the truth needed to come out. Upstairs, Grandpa Joe was sitting up in bed, looking older than I'd ever seen him. His eyes found mine as I entered, and I saw something I'd never seen before, genuine remorse. Emily, he said quietly. I've been thinking about David Morrison. Detective Morrison's son. He died while I was cashing checks meant for people like him. I sat down in a chair beside his bed. The person who's been blackmailing you, they're gone now. But the federal investigation is real. He nodded slowly. Good. It should be real. He reached for my hand, then stopped himself. I know you can't forgive me. I know the family is destroyed. But I need you to know, everything I did wrong, you did right. You chose truth over loyalty, and that took courage I never had. I didn't choose anything, I said softly. I was manipulated. But you're right about one thing, the truth needed to come out. As I left his room for what would be the last time, I realized that despite everything, the manipulation, the destroyed family relationships, the pain, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. The truth had a weight to it, even when it came wrapped in deception. And sometimes, that weight is exactly what broken systems need to finally change.